This video was chosen for production by my subscribers on Patreon. If you'd like to help pick the next one, the link is in the description. Hello everyone. Today's video is all about the small railway that runs from the ancient town of Arlesdale, where it meets Duck's branch line, and winds along through the peaceful Arle Valley until it reaches Arlesdale. We'll be looking at the engines and rolling stock of the line, the route it takes, the history of the line and why it came to be written into the railway series. We'll also explore the possible future of the line beyond what the lore of the series tells us. I've recently made a similar video to this about the Coldefell Railway. This video will be a little different though, as the history of the area is also tied to another railway that came before the Arlesdale. As that line deserves a video of its own, today we'll only be exploring the small railway from its inception and leave the rest of the valley's history for the future Mid-Sodor Railway video. Although it's not quite life imitating art, this is also the order readers of the railway series found out about these two stages of the railway in the area, as the Arlesdale Railway was fully introduced 3 books before the Mid-Sodor. Let's start by exploring why the line was written into the series to start with. Back in 1966, Wilbur Awdry visited the Ravenglass and Eskdale Railway in Cumbria. The line had recently been preserved, and in a few short years had gone from being in dire straits to a successful tourist attraction. He visited first with his friend, Teddy Boston, and then later with his wife, Margaret. On his first visit with Teddy Boston, the events which inspired the story Tit for Tat really happened, and on a subsequent visit with his friend, so did the events of Mike's Whistle. After the writing of the series had passed to him, Christopher Awdry and his family experienced the events of We Need Another Engine personally. More on those stories later, but it's funny how many of the stories of the line really happened to members of the Awdry family. The 15-inch gauge line in the Lake District was built on the trackbed of a former 3-foot gauge line. It was used to carry granite from a quarry, as well as passengers. At the time of the two reverends' visit, the line had 3 steam engines named after local rivers, River Ert, River Esk and River Mite. All of these real-life factors were adapted into Sodor's miniature railway. The line is built on the track of a former larger line, this time a 2-foot 3-inch gauge railway, and it serves a quarry. The 3 counterpart engines got very similar sounding names. River Ert became Bert, and River Mite became Mike. River Esk is a bit more of a stretch, but I think Rex is a pretty good sound-alike. It's not known if small railway engines was written in part as a request by someone at the Ravenglass and Eskdale Railway, so it may be that the fun the family had on the line may have been impetus enough. So that's how there came to be the ideas for the Arlesdale Railway, but let's now take a look at the in-universe history of this boisterous little line. For about 50 years, the Arle Valley was served by the Mid-Sodor Railway, which ran between the harbour at Arlesborough and the important town of Peel Godred. After a period of decline, the line closed for good in 1947, the engines and the rolling stock disposed of, and in 1952 to 1953, the rails were lifted and taken to the nearby Skarloey Railway. For the next 20 years or so, the area had no rail links to speak of, apart from the infrequent service along the Arlesborough branch line to Tidmouth. The North Western Railway did not want to run these services, and the line was not maintained well. In 1964, however, with the growth of traffic by sea putting a strain on the other ports on the island, the Fat Controller fully reinstated the branch line and Arlesborough was redeveloped. He made several inspection visits to the neighbourhood while considering his dock options and made a key discovery. The scantily used and poorly maintained North Western branch line was riddled with weeds, while the old Mid-Sodor trackbed, abandoned in 1947 and with the rails removed about 6 years later, was still relatively weed-free. He investigated and discovered the Mid-Sodor Railway used spoil from the lead mines as ballast. This material they could take freely from the mines just by asking for it, and by happy chance this turned out to be weed resisting. After scientifically showing that the spoil had this most desirable of properties, Sir Topham Hatt proposed a consortium consisting of the management of the railways of the island, the North Western, the Skarloey and the Coldefell, that they should exploit this resource. A railway, they decided, was the best way to collect and carry this material. The manager of the Coldefell Railway, Mr. Walter Richards, suggested the railway not only cater for the transport of ballast, but also be a tourist line, due to the scenic nature of the valley. Sir Handel Brown of the Skarloey Railway seconded the motion, and it was carried unanimously. The Arlesborough Railway Company was thereafter formed. About 10 miles of former Mid-Sodor Railway trackbed, any remaining infrastructure such as stations, and the lead mines at Farquhar Road and Arlesdale were purchased. It's possible the one at Casnehowen was too, although the line does not reach there. Around this time, The granite quarry at Marthwaite was also listed for sale, which the consortium purchased, finally becoming the Arlesdale Granite and Ballast Company Limited. The line was envisaged as being one full of character to attract holidaymakers, as well as sturdy enough to handle heavy ballast trains. Inspiration was found a few miles off the eastern coast of Sodor. The Ravenglass and Eskdale Railway, with its 15-inch gauge engines, suitably impressed the railway board, and thanks to an introduction from Wilbert Awdry, the chairman, Lord Harry Boraine, was put in contact with the Ravenglass management. The lines have a close connection, and many pieces of advice on all matters of railway business have been passed between the two. This friendly relationship continues to this day. Fruit of this camaraderie was apparent straight away. The Ravenglass Company was able to advise where 3 15-inch gauge engines and matching passenger stock could be obtained, as well as give access to their archive where plans of bogie hopper wagons and the chute for delivering the contents of the hoppers into larger vessels below were found. With their motive power, passenger and goods vehicles secured, the incorporation of as much of the well-built Mid-Sodor architecture as possible, the track was then rapidly laid on the solid Mid-Sodor foundations under the instruction of the General Manager. Mr. Fergus Duncan was appointed General Manager in 1967, but is more commonly known as a small controller. Funnily enough, he is bigger than the other controllers. He never married, dedicating his life to the railway. Born in 1936, he was in very good health as he approached his 70th birthday back in 2005, and so would be almost 90 as of 2025. He stated he would retire at the age of 80, which would be nearly 50 years of service to the line. It is currently unknown who took over his duties, if he did indeed retire at 80. So it was that by March the 26th, 1967, the Arlesdale Railway was open to the public. The 3 small engines had already been bringing loads of ballast down the line for processing, which was taken away by Duck, Donald and Douglas. After the line opens for passengers, Bert gets splashed by the thin and fat clergyman, Mike loses his whistle, and Rex derails on a goods train. Sometime after this, Frank is built, and he crashes into the rear of the shed on the day the Small Railway Engines book is published. He makes up for this by helping Rex when he breaks down. In 1969, the engines helped carry Duke's search party up to the end of their line. The line did not have any suitable trucks to help carry the rescued engine out though. In 1975, Bert's coupling snapped, and it was repaired with superglue. In 1976, Jock joined the line, and showed his strength in moving a trailer full of sleepers and hauling a full train while pushing Mike at the same time. It seems likely that the radio control system was introduced around this time, but we will return to that in due course. The last we hear about the small railway is in 1994, when Bert advises Wilbur about how to pull a train with a broken coupling. Now, let's meet the locomotives and rolling stock of the line, including when they arrived and what their roles are. As far as we know, there are 4 steam engines and at least 4 diesels on the small railway, as well as some coaches, trucks and hoppers. We shall meet them in the order they appeared in print, first in small railway engines, then in the Island of Sodor, its people, history and railways, then Jock the new engine, and finally we'll address any other bits of information after that. In small railway engines we meet the first 3 steam engines on the railway. These engines pull passenger and goods trains and are the flagship locomotives of the line. The oldest is Bert. Initially built as an 080 and dating from the 1890s, he was rebuilt by the Yorkshire Engine Company to an 082 with a larger firebox. This mirrors his real-life basis, number 3 River Ert, once called Muriel, who ran on the Duffield Bank Railway. Next is Rex, a 282 engine who was built in 1923 and has a counterpart on the Ravenglass and Eskdale Railway, number 7 River Esk. These engines are noted as being built at the same time at Davy Paxman and have had identical rebuilds at the same time. Mike is the youngest of the 3. He is another 282, but his date of building is not listed. It is known that he was built by Clarksons of York though, the same company as constructed his Ravenglass equivalent, River Mite, number 9. River Mite was built in 1966, and the Arlesdale Railway was opened in 1967, so Mike must have been built in 1966 or earlier. The passenger rolling stock on the line is formed of the open and semi-open coaches, while goods can be carried on bogie flatbeds or the ballast is moved in bogie hoppers. After we meet the 3 engines in 1967, we get some more information about some of the other engines on the line in the Island of Sodor, released in 1987. Firstly, Bert was rebuilt in 1973, as his rebuild by the Yorkshire Engine Company did not cure his shy steaming. He was rebuilt with a kill chap blast pipe and a taller chimney, which fixed the problem, and he was given a larger cab to give him a more narrow gauge rather than miniature appearance. This rebuild is like the one River Ert received the previous year. The rolling stock of the line has also developed. The open coaches have been retained for fine weather, but the semi-opens have been replaced by saloon coaches built at Arlesdale Works. In terms of new engines, several are mentioned. Jock is the only steam engine, a strong 262, built in 1976 combining the best elements of Rex, Mike and Bert, including his rebuild. He was designed by Ivan Farrier, the chief engineer of the railway, alongside Ian Smith, his counterpart from the Ravenglass, as both lines needed a fourth steam locomotive. On the Ravenglass, this engine is number 10 Northern Rock, the designs for which were started in 1972 by taking the 462 Northern Chief from the Romney Highland Gymchurch Railway on trial. Jock becomes the fourth flagship locomotive, able to do the same work as Rex, Bert and Mike. A pair of diesel tractors called Blisters 1 and 2 are introduced. They are both based on the Ravenglass No. 9 diesel Cyril. The Blisters are said to have arrived in time for the Arlesdale Railway's construction in the mid-1960s, but although Cyril was built in 1932, it did not arrive on the Ravenglass until 1985. After construction, they have been retained for maintenance and shunting duties. Sigrid of Arlesdale was the final engine introduced. She is a 464 diesel who has a counterpart on the Ravenglass called Sheila of Eskdale, their No. 7 diesel. She was built in 1969, and while her history since then seems to match her Cumbrian counterpart, the real engine was built in the 1950s. She is used on service trains, as well as a relief engine if the steam engines fail. One final point about the train updates is that engines received radio control systems on their encouragement of the Ravenglass, due to the often required relief trains upsetting the previous system of railway control. The Ravenglass adopted this practice in 1977, so the Arlesdale Railway would have it from 1977 or later. Jock was created by Wilbur Audrey, but did not appear in the Railway series until 1990 in the book Jock the New Engine by his son Christopher. This book also introduced another small diesel, but Sigrid and the Blisters did not appear. Frank is a diesel shunter, used for permanent way trains and shunting coaches at Arlesborough. He was built at some point before his debut in 1990 out of parts of other engines at Arlesdale with a Perkins engine. His Ravenglass counterpart is diesel number 4, Perkins. One final source for small railway lore is the Narrow Gauge Railways in Sodor lecture from 1972, which reveals that 10 of the hoppers were built, and that there was once a blue Bobo diesel on the railway, based on Ravenglass No. 6 diesel Royal Anchor. This engine often worked lighter trains, or double-headed with Sheila of Eskdale. It's unknown what happened with this engine. It's possible it still exists on the Arlesdale Railway, or it may have been replaced in the lore with Sigrid of Arlesdale. There is no reason to think the two could not coexist in real life. There is also something in the lectures that makes it seem that Frank is closer to his real-life basis than first meets the eye, as he seems to have, at one point, been built as a steam outline, matching the engine's real history, and was painted green. Now, this doesn't contradict the wording that he was built out of the parts of other engines at Arlesdale, as this is also true of Perkins at Ravenglass. However, the events of Jock the New Engine do complicate things. First of all, with Jock the New Engine, we do have to deal with some potential anachronisms, and I'm not including the time Jock had his nameplate before being named, which was corrected in later illustrations. The points are these. Bert is in his old shape, which had gone by 1973. Radio control is used, but this was not present until about 1977 or later. Frank is in a shape that was not designed until 1984, and the semi-opens are present, but these had gone by 1987 and the saloon coaches are not seen. So, why are these factors potentially anachronisms? Jock the New Engine came out in 1990, but the stories included were set sometime prior. The first story, We Need Another Engine, is set on the 1st of August 1967, the date small railway engines were published. In real life, on this date, Perkins crashed into the shed at Ravenglass. It was joked that the engine was annoyed at being left out of the book. Well, in this story the same thing happens, with Frank not appearing in small railway engines as he was not around when the book was written, and he's unhappy that he won't be in the pictures. The following day, Frank rescues Rex, and the crews are using their radio control to arrange the engine's movements. So in this first story, Frank's design and the use of radios is anachronistic. In Sticking Power, it is mentioned that a new engine, i.e. Jock, is being built. If this story took place just before Bert's rebuild, say in 1972 or 1973, this would make sense, as this is after the designs for Northern Rock and therefore potentially Jock were started. However, the story makes it clear that this story happens in 1975, so Bert should have been rebuilt by now. The same could be said for the following two stories, Jock and Teamwork, which both take place in 1976, so Bert should be in his new shape, and Frank's appearance and teamwork is also debatable, as is the use of a radio telephone in the story. Okay, so let's deal with these potential anachronisms and see if they can be straightened out. Firstly, the semi-open's appearing and the saloon's not doesn't contradict any dates we have, but it's likely that by the final story the saloons would be in service on the line. Not updating the appearance of the rolling stock and engines is something the series has done before, and could be written off as a mistake that has been made to help with continuity. This may be the case with the coaches, and also may be the case for some of the following points. The next is Bert's appearance. The Island of Sodor introduces the rebuild in 1987, 3 years before Jock the New Engine came out, and Christopher echoed this rebuild in Sodor Reading Between the Lines in 2005, without pointing out a mistake was made in the illustrations. This error could be explained by saying that there was not a story featuring Bert's rebuild, so the decision was made to keep Bert look the same throughout the stories to avoid confusion. By rights, he should be in his old shape in the first story only. This is in fact something that has happened before in the series, with Donald and Douglas retaining their old black livery in Thomas and the Missing Christmas Tree due to their appearance in the TV series. Something similar could be said for Frank's appearance. If we go by the lore from the lecture and the real-life engine at the time, Frank should be a green steam outline at the time of the book is set. It's possible in the world of the Railway series that Perkins' rebuild in the 1980s was based on a previous rebuild of Frank, or it's also possible that Frank in the books is illustrated non-canonically to make it easier to recognise him. Another time this may have happened in the books is when Diesel comes back in Thomas and the Evil Diesel, when he should not have been wearing BR black. Those two anachronisms aren't necessarily that big, to be honest, as many illustrations have mistakes, and at least in the case with the established character of Bert, an argument could be made to keep him looking the same throughout the book. The picture's canonicity can be overwritten by the text, and that's fine. The radio system, however, is a problem. This system could not have come in until about 10 years after the events of the first story it appears in, as it was used on the Ravenglass first. It's not essential to the story, and probably just a factor of the railway Christopher Audrey wanted to include, but there isn't a satisfactory way to include it in the narrative without changing the established lore of the railway. So now we've had a look at the history of the line and the engines and coaches that will take us on our journey, so let's get to know the route. The first thing to note is that as the line follows much the same route as the Mid-Sodor Railway before it, I'm going over the state of the line in the days of the Arlesdale Railway. As the decisions made for the line's route may have come about during the construction of the Mid-Sodor, I will reference them here, but go into much more detail when I make the Mid-Sodor video. Some of the images may show the line in the days of the Mid-Sodor, if one of the area with its current railway are not available. We begin at Arlesborough. This station is connected by a footbridge by the platform to Arlesborough West at Duck's branch line. It takes us over the standard gauge yard and delivers us to the headquarters of the small railway. Here we have a map showing the layout of the station area as it was at the time of small railway engines. The platform is on the eastern side of the line, with a platform building and manager's office, before a line leads off to the carriage shops. Next there are the engine sheds, and on the other side of the line there is the chute, where ballast loads can be dropped from hopper wagons into standard gauge trucks. Not shown on the map are the new platform, now to be found on the other side of the line, complete with a protective wall and shelter. The chute has also been enclosed now to prevent dust. The diesel shed and carriage shed would also be found on this side of the line. The signal cabin, which also houses the radio equipment, can be found on this side too. The timber buildings have served their purpose well and were planned for replacement in the 1980s. The station is some way further inland than the Mid-Sodor's other station at Arlesborough, that being at the harbour. Development in the intervening years meant reviving this part of the Mid-Sodor network was impossible, and the new site is far more appropriate for passengers and goods transfers to the North Western Railway. The first station we reach is Arlesborough Bridge Street. This station was once Mid-Sodor's main station, but the infrastructure decayed and the land was far too commodious for the small railway's needs, being only an intermediary stop. The extra land was sold off, and what remained of the Mid-Sodor's buildings was demolished. At first, a single platform with a wooden hut sufficed, as most passengers board at Arlesborough West. Due to demand though, the platform has been lengthened and a stone building replaced with the wooden one. The road crossed on the level back in the days of the Mid-Sodor, but now there is a bridge. The next stop is Farquhar Road. There are 2 platforms here, and the stone building dates from the Mid-Sodor, minus the roof which is new. This is where the branch from the first former mine can be found, south of the main line in the Hackenbach Valley, from where spoil is transported. The passing loop here was added sometime after the line was opened to aid congestion. Further on is an old watermill. This was bought by the railway in a derelict state and leased to volunteers for a small amount of rent to ensure that no undesirable development occurred in the beautiful valley. This is now a tourist attraction and the old mill pond has become a sanctuary. From here on in, the valley now becomes more wooded, and in a clearing we find the middle station, Marthwaite. It retains its stone station building from the mid-Sodor on the southern side of the line, and a new one has been built on the north side too. The passing loop was found to be insufficient and has been extended. A branch line comes off this station, going to the granite quarry, and the yard area has increased in size to accommodate the railway's bogie hoppers. Next follows another spell in the woodland, where the third passing loop is laid. There are two rocky outcrops here that the line has to pass through, meaning that the passing loop for the station had to be outside. This station is Arlesdale Green. Initially the remains of the mid-Sodor station on this site were tidied up, but later developments were a stone shelter and proper platform edging. In the 1980s, the small controller had his house near here. After passing through another wooded area, the next station is the terminus at Arlesdale. The station is on a different site to the old mid-Sodor one. The old station had not fared well after 20 years and was too dilapidated to repair. The new site was on the mid-Sodor's branch line to a mine. The site the small railway station now occupies is more convenient for the village of Arlesdale and nearby hamlet of the Garth and the church at Kirklees, as well as being closer to the mines. The station here initially had 2 roads, now expanded to 3, and a second platform has been added. The spur to the mine passes behind the wall. Okay, so now I think we know enough about the railway's past that we can have a look at the possible future of the line, past where we last heard about it in the books. So if you have a look at the rolling stock section of the Ravenglass and Eskdale Wikipedia page, you might be surprised with the number of locomotives they have listed compared with the Arlesdale Railway. It must be remembered that while the 3 extant narrow gauge lines on Sodor all have one clear real-life counterpart, none of them are carbon copies of the original. As such, can we expect any of the numerous Ravenglass engines to have a Sodor equivalent that does not have one already? Let's go through them one by one and explore the other engines. Number 1, Sanspareil and Sinalda. Sanspareil was a 442 built in Nottingham in 1912. It worked in Norway for about 3 years before being repatriated and worked the line for about 10 years before being withdrawn and dismantled. An identical engine called Sinalda is now preserved at the Ravenglass Museum, so I've included them together. These engines were not strong enough to be of use for the ballast or tourist traffic for which the Arlesdale would use them. The Ravenglass Railway only steams Sinalda at special events, and as there is no indication the Arlesdale Railway has a museum, or that there is a preservation of minimum gauge engines movement on the line, these engines are not ones we should consider for Sodor. Number 2, Colossus. This was the first Pacific 15-inch gauge engine in the world. It ran from 1913 to 1927, when the engine was worn out. It was a unique 462 version of the class Sanspareil and Sinalda were. The engine's short lifespan, and the fact it was unique, make it highly unlikely that a double could have been built and lasted until the 1960s or later to go to Sodor. Number 4, Ella. She arrived in 1917 with number 3 Muriel, who would later be rebuilt into River Ert and therefore be the basis of Bert. Both engines came from an estate railway. Ella was rebuilt in 1927 into an internal combustion engine which was withdrawn in the 1950s. Number 5, Sir Aubrey Brocklebank. This was another 462 which ran well on the line, but in 1927 it was decided to combine number 5 with the worn out number 2 to make a new engine. This experiment was not successful. More about that in a moment. If Sir Aubrey Brocklebank had not been cannibalised, maybe the engine would have continued well. As it did not, I don't think a Sodor version is necessary. Number 6, Katie. This small engine only worked the line between 1916 and 1919. Like numbers 3 and 4, she was formerly based on an estate railway. She returned to the line in 1992 and was restored to original condition in 2017, and is now found in the museum. She is only steamed at special events like Sinalda, and this makes her an unlikely addition to Sodor. Number 8, River Mite 1. This is not the River Mite that currently runs on the line, who is number 9, on which Mike is based. This articulated engine was built in 1927 from the bodies of Colossus and Sir Aubrey Brocklebank, and using parts from Sanspareil too. The body was found to be too weak and it was withdrawn about 10 years after entering service. It was planned to be strengthened, but the Second World War meant this idea was abandoned and the loco was broken up in the 50s. I doubt the Arlesdale would want an engine like this, considering the line didn't open for decades after it failed. All of these locomotives, aside from Sinalda, arrived before Jock, who is stated in the Island of Sodor to be the 4th steam engine acquired for the line. As such, I don't think any of them could be considered. Number 11, Bonnie Dundee. This engine was originally a 2-foot gauge well tank, regauged and converted to an 042, and then being rebuilt into a tender engine in 1996. The engine was only suitable for light work and left the railway in 2021 before finally being sold in 2025. As the Arlesdale does not have any need for an engine like this, as with the other weaker engines previously listed, I don't think it's necessary. Flower of the Forest. This unusual 022 vertical boiler engine followed the same path as Bonnie Dundee, being sold in 2025. It was not in regular service and so not needed for the Arlesdale Railway. Number 12, Will and Beck. This recent addition to the line is the 5th current flagship locomotive for the line and has been quite an interesting story. Built in 1929 for a World's Fair in Spain, the engine, then known as Pinta, worked there until 1932 when it was placed in storage for 30 odd years. It was then moved to a park in Madrid and in the 2000s to one in Barcelona. After being in storage for the best part of 10 years, the engine was bought by the Raven class and steamed for the first time since 1932 in 2016. As well as being a good candidate for a Sodor counterpart, it's easy to see how this would work in universe, with Will and Beck being one of 4 engines constructed for the Expo, as well as being one of 15 ever made, so there is scope for the Arlesdale Railway to take one of these others. Along with the 14 steam engines the Raven class has run, there have also been another 14 internal combustion engines on the line. Number 1, Bunny. This engine from 1923 could not haul full trains and was superseded by other internal combustion locos. It was withdrawn in 1950, so quite a long time before the small railway opened. Number 2. Like number 1, this 1927 engine was withdrawn in the 1950s. However, it was a far stronger engine. Its early withdrawal date makes a Sodor counterpart unlikely though. NG41. This tractor from 1929 was used on quarry trains, but was withdrawn in 1953 and scrapped in 1972. As with the previous 2, it was not successful enough to warrant a companion on the Arlesdale Railway. Number 5, Quarryman. This tractor from 1926 still survives. It was used on permanent way trains, but given a full cab to allow it to work on relief trains before being converted back to its original condition. It's now part of the museum rather than the main fleet, but its longevity is to be applauded. Silver Jubilee. This was a railcar set, used on shuttle services, school trains and winter services. It first appeared as a single car in 1976 before becoming a 3-car rake until it was converted back to normal coaching stock in 2003. This is a really fun engine, but I don't see Sodor as having a need for such an engine. Number 8, Lady Wakefield. This diesel was built in 1980, can handle heavy trains and is used on both passenger and permanent way trains. This versatile diesel was built at a good time, and to do the right sort of work that means the basis may be appropriate for the small railway. Greenbat. This engine was bought second hand for shunting in 1982. With the blisters and Frank, I don't think Sodor needs another shunter. Black Olvesley. This steam outline engine was built in 1909, but did not arrive at the Ravenglass until 1994. It is operational, but kept in the museum, and so not what the Arlesdale needs. Number 10, Les. This engine was built by the same company as the blisters. It is used for shunting, and so, like Greenbat, seems unnecessary. I do really like the look of this little guy though. Number 11, Douglas Ferreira. In 2005, a developed version of Lady Wakefield was built. This engine has been a great servant for the railway, and so may well be a good contender for a railway series basis. So just to summarise quickly, for the steam engines, I think Will and Beck is the only engine that deserves a Sodor equivalent, and for the diesels, at least one of Lady Wakefield and Douglas Ferreira. If I had to suggest another, then Quarryman for its hard work in the early days, or Les to only be used for shunting would be a fun looking option. If I were to give these engines railway series names, Will and Beck is an easy one. A beck is another word for river, and so with rivers Ert, Esk and Might, a sound alike for Willen is needed. I think William works rather well here. For the diesels, Lady Wakefield is apparently known as Doris, so I'd suggest a name that rhymes with or sounds close to that. Morris, Norris, Wallace, there are lots of good ones. For Douglas Ferreira, the Sodor equivalent would be Fergus Duncan, which I think works well. For Quarryman, I think Marthwaite, maybe shortened to Martha, would be good. And for Les, maybe Wes or Des. As well as many new engines, the Ravenglass has a lot of new coaches. Some of these should surely be considered, with the first coaches on the line now approaching 60 years old. They're not the most comfortable vehicles either. Sodor equivalents of the opens, semi-opens and closed saloon stock exists, but the special saloons like the Director's Saloon, Pullman observation coach, and first-class carriages would add variety to the passengers and be a natural progression for the tourist side of the line. In terms of goods rolling stock, updates are very possible, but it must be remembered that almost all the freight on the small railway is for the Ballast and Granite Company. Quite a long time has passed since the line opened, so we do not know if the mines and quarry have yet worn out, so it's hard to say what goods stock, if any, would be needed. It's likely though that they have new permanent way vehicles, as does the Ravenglass. It's also possible, although unlikely, that the line could be extended. The first possible extension is continuing south from Arlesdale and having a new terminus in northern Olvested. This would be a great opportunity for tourism, but the extension would be roughly another 5 miles, which would give the engines quite a lot more work to do. The second is extending to Casnahowen. We know that the Arlesdale Railway own the track bed at least until the old Arlesdale station. It's possible that they could manage all the way to Casnahowen, where there is another mine. After almost 60 years of operation, we don't know if there's any spoil left to exploit in the mines at Farquhar Road at Arlesdale, so the one at Casnahowen may have remained untapped until more recently. In terms of access, we know the line is steeper here, which may be too much work for the small engines, but with a halt at the old Arlesdale Works, perhaps with a mid-Sodor History Museum, and another further on at Casnahowen where there is already an information centre, this may be viable. The area is a beauty spot, as well as having interesting natural features. So that's the whole history and some possible futures of the Arlesdale Railway. I really enjoyed this one. Although it only stars in 2 books, the railway and its engines are full of personality and fun. If I may make a personal point for a minute, this line does have a special place in my heart, as the first copy of small railway engines I ever owned, aged about 5, was given to me by my grandparents. "Grandad is very excited to give you this book," said my nan. "There is an engine in it with his name." His name was Rex. Both my grandparents are now gone, but it's a wonderful thing still to have that personal connection to the character. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to the Patreon like these fine folk to help pick the next video subject, get early access to new content, and help support the channel.